This is Midnight Alchemy with your host Jason Allen on the Left Coast Media Network. And now here's Jason.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever and whenever you are. This is Midnight Alchemy, and I am Jason Allen. Woo boy, it would be an understatement to say that this is going to be a one humdinger of an episode. Going to be talking with Demonologist extraordinaire Nathaniel Gillis, and folks, we are going to be swimming in some deep waters here in a bit. First, let's take care of some quick paranormal news from the Mirror in the UK. Time traveler proves it's real with photo of future city from the year 6000. The man who claims to be a time traveler insists he was part of a top secret program to send people into the future and has brought back a pic to back up what he says. Oh boy. All right, step aside, Doctor Who. This man says he's been to the future and he has a photo to prove it. A bizarre video shows the time traveler whose face is blurred meeting a reporter at an undisclosed location to reveal what he knows about the secret technologies and what the future holds for humanity in the year 6000. The self-appointed whistleblower, who has his voice distorted, claims to have been part of a secret program to send people forward in time in the 1990s. He says advances in medicine, government, and new technology will make modern life seem primitive, and humankind lives in peace under the benevolent rule of an AI overlord. To prove his point, in the middle of a rambling speech, he produced a photo of an unnamed city. Unfortunately, it is so blurred that it is more in common with a Monet watercolor painting than a futuristic landscape. But hold on to your horses, folks. He claims in the time travel process, pictures tend to get distorted as well as many other things. He adds, I know a lot of you are going to find my story extremely hard to believe, and I don't blame you. And if I was watching somebody claim these same things, I myself would most likely not believe them. It is not my intention to deceive anybody, he says. I simply want to spread a message about the future of humanity and where the world is heading. I have seen the way the world's changed and the technologies that have emerged. It would blow your mind if you only knew the technologies that exist in the year 6000. Time travel. Yes. So let's get right to it. Let's get to the interview, shall we? Demonologist Nathaniel Gillis is here with us today. He is a widely respected demonologist, and we are going to get into all sorts of trouble. Nathaniel, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great, and I'm glad to be with you. It's a whole new audience for me, and I'm just excited to share some of my work with you.
Yeah, awesome. If you don't mind, you talked a little earlier about Coast to Coast AM.
Right.
I mean, that's the big leagues here. We're like, if we're using baseball, they're major league, and I'm what?
Well, yeah, it's it's kind of funny. Like my very first show ever, before I was ever on radio, was Coast to Coast. That was because I had emailed them some of my research, and I was like, well, this is a new perspective on demonology. But yeah, so I'll be on there tonight, or it's gonna be 3 a.m. Eastern, which is going to be tough for yours truly, because it's like from 3 to 5. I'm pretty much staying up the whole night.
Right, but you are literally burning the midnight oil.
Yeah, no doubt.
Right. Okay. Straight right out of the gate, we're going to go the very first step, and that is, what got you started on studying demonology? How did you fall into that?
So I encountered the phenomenon at 8 years old, between 8 and 9 years old. My parents were moving into a new house, and we went in to tour before we actually closed on it. I went into what would become my future bedroom, and when I did, I saw a full-bodied apparition hiding underneath the bed. So it was a little girl. Yeah, it was just bam, out of nowhere. I'm thinking, what? I couldn't place her, and in my little mind, I kept thinking that she belonged to some family that lived in the cul-de-sac. But no, it was an entity, and upon moving into the house, it mutated, it evolved. And so it wasn't an actual little girl, it was just a being that had tried to, I guess, appear innocent in my eyes for whatever purposes.
I have a saying for those type of moments, and that definitely is a poop your Panthers type of moment.
Yeah.
How did the 8-year-old you handle that? Holy.
Well, there were three things that were present in that room, at least that I experienced. Number one, it was obviously the full-bodied apparition, but there was a stench of something in that room. I mean, some people call it decomposition. Others people, like in antiquity, they called it you're literally smelling consciousness. I've heard different theories, but yeah, that was a very tough time for me. I mean, you're talking about a young kid who, like, when I would go to sleep at night, I would have a recurring nightmare over and over again. It was like a running loop, and it consisted of a couple of things that were way beyond my peripheral vision as a youngster. Number one, the nightmare would always include me walking up upon two young people, young boys, maybe about 17, 18. They were on a picnic table, their backs turned towards me. One had a needle in his arm.
Ooh.
And again, as a young kid, I had no frame of reference for that.
Yeah.
Right. I didn't even know what insulin was. I had no frame of reference whatsoever. So, and then the young guy to the left of me, he's the one that turned around and made eye contact with me, pulled out a black 357 Magnum, stuck it in his mouth to pull the trigger.
Oh my God.
And it's a rolling, looping nightmare. And so what would happen is it was almost like my energy and my fear and terror would get worked up. Then I would wake up shivering, and there would be a presence in the room, seemingly feeding off of my fear. And that was my first encounter with whatever we're going to be discussing tonight.
Right. Feeding off that energy. Holy cow, man. Again, 8-year-old Jason sitting in his room late at night, full apparition. Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. Either A, jumping out of the window, B, pooping my pants, and then jumping out of the window, and then C, running around in a circle, then pooping my pants, then jumping out of the window. Or E, all of the above. So that really interesting.
It's not fun.
No.
Yeah.
Oh. Go ahead.
No, I mean, it was instrumental in my desire to become who I am and to add value to this research. But, I lived with it. I mean, it took a shower with me. It went to bed with me. It woke up with me when I got ready for school. I mean, it was always present. And so my thing was that at a young age, I had to learn a certain coping mechanism around it. And it was almost like it would manufacture terror and then use that terror as a source, a food source, even possibly. I don't know. But whatever it was transactional. In other words, it would conjure something in me and then feed off of my response to it. And so it did give me some insight into how these beings work, but it was a wild time in my life, no doubt.
I bet. I'm going to ask just the most basic of question. What is a demon?
Well, I could tell you what others are going to tell you, and it's based upon, obviously, a religious tradition. But even the origins of the demonic in biblical scriptures, they're not clearly defined. And here's the problem with scholars and researchers alike. Anytime that we find a definition of what a demon was, it's always retrospectively. In other words, when we first heard of the sons of God, the author is assuming we already know who they're talking about. Yeah. But it's only right later on in history that we look back and say, okay, this is what we know they believed in the first century, but that evolved. It was very fluid. So there were two dominating schools of thought. One is rooted in Catholicism, and that these are all horns and horns. These are fallen angels, or these are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim. And the problem is, and this is what we're looking at in the field now, is okay, if you look at possession case studies and you open up your lens to a macro level instead of that which just limited to Catholicism or another religious organization or denomination rather, you'll start to see that there is a common thematic element during these case studies, that there are bloody behavioral footprints in the snow, if you will, to where you can look at and say, okay, I'll tell you what we've done. In a frail attempt to apply agency, we've given these beings titles, not realizing that they're doing the same thing to the same people, and that there is a unified source of intelligence here.
Right.
So that's what I've hopefully been able to bring to the field is a deeper discussion on a more intellectual and academic level of, okay, are these beings what our ancestors called demons?
Right. Right.
Does that make sense?
No, what I was going to say, you're absolutely right. I mean, when you're talking about an interpretation of what it is through the Abrahamic religions, even Hindu and Buddhist have some lore on that, and so you really got to try, like you said, that universality, right? The common thread that kind of links their interpretations to it. The only experience I've ever had through that, and I will tell you of my ignorance, is I was also at when I was a much younger man, I was in seminary to become a Catholic priest. One of the guys who I actually got to get to know a little bit was Father Malachi Martin, and he was, he was.
Let me see if I have it.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, brother. I'm listening, man. I have
all good.
I think it's forget where it's at. Hostage to the Devil. And I have a friend of mine that's sending me a windswept house with Malachi Martin's autograph to add to my library. So I will be freaking out because I'm a big Martin fan. So I'm listening, brother. Good.
Oh yeah, man. He even helped me pick out what seminary to go to. What was good,
right?
What kind of sucked. And I didn't make it all the way through. Luckily, I ran into my wife, and that was it. But
there we go.
Yeah. So my lens obviously is through one of the Abrahamic religions. Now I studied some of that when I was in seminary. How in Islam they may talk about the jinn, and I don't know too much about that, but through your framework, right? What are the different types of demons?
Well, again, I think that this is what separates me from other systematic demonologists, because at least in my research, I believe these demons to be a semi-program that these beings employ to manipulate us. They're merely roles and masks in which to hide behind, and more than that, in which to deceive us, to which we would say, okay, they fall into this category of being, right? And if they're that category, they can't be this category then. And truthfully, what we're looking at is if they're not they're not dichotomies, they're dualities. Now, in order if we're going to get into case studies and programs, it seems to be that most of your demonology is centered around the fact that possession to us is pregnancy to them. Now, this gets really deep because you'll start to see nuances of the UFO abduction phenomenon in here. And it's not even like I'm trying to make that happen. It's just, the research is there. And people like you, okay, kind of sounds like what we're dealing with today. Right. I mean, my research as of late has been centered around incubi and succubi cases throughout history. And the way the phenomenon has masked itself to us and the desire to deceive us. Now, this gets very interesting. I mean, if you get into case studies of incubi and succubi, for those who don't know, because I didn't know either, an incubus entity is an entity that appears to a woman in the image of a man. Now, I've had cases of these beings appearing to women in the images of their former lovers, of their current husbands, of their deceased boyfriends, all of the above. And it's intercultural, it's interreligious, cross-cultural rather. So it's present. But when you get into these case studies, you start to see that there are incredible interconnectivities between what's been going on throughout biblical history, Mesopotamia, Eastern Mediterranean literature, and what we're witnessing now in the field of ufology. Now, and I don't want to ramble, but I got to make this point. What's happening is we have people who want to make this a modern phenomenon. Because if it's a modern phenomenon, there's going to be a modern origin. Doing that, what they're wanting to do, even if it's unintentionally, is say that it's not an ancient phenomenon, because if it is an ancient phenomenon, they gotta answer for the ancient origin.
Right, right. You also have to take into account, even through like the Abrahamic framework, all the different the ways they were. I mean, from ancient Judaism to when you get into the Aramaic, Greek, into the vernacular, what gets lost?
Oh my God! Right, right.
Because you better hope that monk, sitting in some tower somewhere by candlelight, knows what the heck he's doing.
Right, absolutely.
So what gets lost? I've always been, probably I'm going to do a show probably later on about that, because I've always been intrigued about, what's been lost,
right,
warped over, time. If we're going if I'm going through an Abrahamic lens, okay, who? Well, first let's start off with this. Are demons fallen angels, and or was there a war in heaven?
I'll give you two answers to that question. Number one, I have a few individuals that I've talked to that are much older than I am, much more connected to the Vatican than I am. And they've told me privately that after going to the Vatican, looking in the archives, sitting down with their scholars, they were told that the war in heaven is still going on, and that's what we're in the middle of. That it's still going on, and that it's literally a war between gods. That's what I've heard. But getting back to your original question, first of all, I think the term fallen angel is again our ancestors' best attempt to interpret the phenomenon. What is this? It's fallen. But what's fallen about an angel? When you put those together, to me at least, because at least my background consisted of like my parents, my dad specifically is a minister. He would fly out these rabbinic scholars, Hebrew researchers from Israel. I'd have them in my house, so I was able to pick their ear. And so what I learned was that, again, what is fallen about an angel and what is angelic about the fallen? And when you're putting both of those together, you see Yahweh Elohim, especially in the Old Testament, obviously in the Old Testament, he'll talk the same way about angels that have fallen as he will about people that are dead. Yeah. They fell in battle. They fell and they were wandering spirits because they were never, given a proper burial or something similar to that. But it wasn't until I got into the Ugaritic text that I started to put things together that you have to think extra biblically in order to understand. Because again, these writers are assuming you already know who they're talking about. And if you don't, you're screwed.
Right.
You don't know. So if we're going to get into the Ugaritic text, there's a word that they found in a ritual bowl. It's repiumai. And it was a messenger, but it was a messenger within the context of a deceased loved one or a deceased ancestor. And so that was what became the Rephaim in the Old Testament, where these beings, these men of old, men of renown, manifested as Rephaim, as the deceased portion of their existence. And so that became, again, that's why in the Hebrew it's malik, malakuma, malik. It's a borrowed loan word. Yeah. But originally what we're dealing with, again, is not somebody who's died because he can't die, or he's immortal because he cannot die. He's immortal because he already has. And so when you start getting into that narrative, you realize that in Genesis 6 and what we consider to be demons, many of them were in fact disembodied ghosts who were trying to create a new body to possess. Right.
Yeah, because I mean, if you're dealing with something that is by nature spirit, trying to find a corporeal sort of body to inhabit, and then we get into the whole Nephilim, right? The men of renown, the sons of God, and come down and mate with the daughters of man. How do they fit in? What are they in terms of an angelic and or semi-angelic? I mean, I don't know.
Right. Well, the Melohagoyim, the sons of God saw the daughters of men and went into them. Now, what's so interesting about that, it's very vague. It's not very detailed. That's what was one of my frustrations when I started researching that aspect of the field. I mean, so you have what's called the Damascus document, the Testament of Reuben, various different authorities on this subject, one of which I found truly intriguing, but is probably disturbing once you get down to it. It's the Apocryphon of John. It's written and preserved by Egyptian monks, and it was a commentary on experiences that these women encountered in Genesis 6. And then what they also added to it was some of their own research and some of what their own people were experiencing. And what you have is essentially these beings manifesting to women in the images of their husbands. Now, my argument that I have with evangelical modernity is, if that is when the angels fell, because some people hypothesize that they fell, then they're still falling.
Yeah.
Because this is still occurring,
right,
in modernity.
Yeah, but that is that's a little mind blowing to think about, you know. And sometimes,
Right.
you know, through the Old Testament and the writers who did it, to me, they're almost echoes of what you're hearing is like the distant echoes of such an ancient past.
Correct.
Time they write about it, how they heard about it. You know, everything back in the day is pre-written, it's oral. You know, it goes from
Right.
one generation to the next generation to the next generation. And what I've always told people about that was, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Johnny Dangerously.
Is that with Keanu?
That's on with Michael Keaton.
Okay, no, I haven't.
Yeah,
No.
he's sitting there in prison, right? And they find news that his brother is going to get shot and killed at a theater that night, right? So one guy whispers it to the other guy, to the other guy, to the other guy, to the other guy, until it gets Keaton. And the guy says, you know, Johnny and the something are going to be stomping at the Savoy tonight, you know. And Keaton goes, "Oh, they're going to kill my brother at the theater," you know. It's side comedic.
Right.
But my you know, my little interpretation of that is things get changed and warped as things go down. Different languages pop up in between. But you're right. There, even through all the echoes of the distant past and history, there always is some sort of universal trait, some sort
Right.
that binds these guys together. And like you, I mean, I've scoured the Apocrypha. I find that just endlessly fascinating. For those of you who don't know what it is, these are some of the books that were written before the Council of Nicaea, when the Catholic Church decided what books they were going to put in the Bible. And you can get into a whole discussion about that, what they deemed redundant or heretical or whatever. I'm not going to make people's eyes glaze over through this, but it is really worth looking into, folks. You listening right now? That's your homework. Please remember, next week there will be a pop quiz. All right. Now, if we're still going through the Abrahamic framework, who is Lucifer?
I don't know. I think that again, when you're getting into that particular text about Lucifer, how art thou fallen, the language that he's being employed there, the verbiage, the textual analysis implies that, again, he's referring to just another king. It's the way he referred to it. It's the way he talked. And this is where, again, this is what it got me into trouble, because when I was reading that particular passage about Lucifer and even demons and everything, I just assumed, okay. But what other passages in the Bible did God mention those words, right? How was that phrase being employed by him? Has he employed that before? So you get into hermeneutics and all of that fancy stuff. But I don't know. Is he a being in and of itself? I don't know. I'm not convinced. And again, I'm going to get crucified for this. I'm not convinced that Hasatan or Satan is exactly what we've been told he is. Psalms 109 and 6. One of the famous, what's called the curse text, that rabbis and scholars alike have an issue with. David implies that these possessing beings, they're like,
to his will, right?
right, and that Satan himself was merely an adversary, an accuser, and so no, this will blow your mind. Psalms 196, David's dealing with a man who is accusing him of something, and he's like, "Man, I'm not doing that." So then he places a curse on him. Now, in the curse, he employs a Hebrew word, rasha. Rasha has a dual meaning. It means possession. We're into demonology now without even knowing, right? Possession and evil, wicked, really. And so he points to his accuser and tells God, place on that accuser an evil possessing man.
Okay.
So that entity, or again, now we're getting to possession and the pathology of possession. It's not just that person was going to be a host to an entity, but that entity would use him as a throne to be both upon and within.
Okay, makes sense. So it's not just somebody inhabiting a skin suit.
No, there's something much deeper going on. Matter of fact, this is included in that text. The author says, place over that man a wicked man, Rasha. I want him on top of that man, literally like on his back, and then I want him inside of that man as possession. And then he says, and place a Satan at his right hand. And so the working hypothesis in demonology for probably centuries was that with every possession, you need to know you need to know if you're talking to the Satan or if you're talking to that disincarnate spirit. Now, moving even deeper, they also talk that the Satan that many people are casting out of people is actually attached to the unclean spirit that's also in that demoniac. And so what's happening, again, this gets really creepy, but what many people have done and experienced is the priest will cast out the fallen angel or the adversary, thinking that we're done, we're good, not realizing that entity is still going to be there because it's waiting on that disincarnate entity that's taken up residence as well. So there's this power struggle. That's just merely one theory, but I think it's interesting.
No, I'm sitting here nodding my head like a bobblehead, right? Because so much of what my personal belief system is too. And we get into the whole. I mean, scholars argue all the time about Lucifer versus Satan. Are they the same person or are they different? And okay, I'm going to throw myself out there. I'm going to say on record, I'm sure I'm going to get skewed for this. I'm going to say that they are two different people, not people, but entities. Simply from what I read on the subject, and I think there's even a better description. Isn't in Isaiah? He talks more about Lucifer and the falling. And I mean, that's what I have to work with.
Yeah, he mentioned something that I've long wrestled with, like both my father and myself. You were perfect in all of your ways until iniquity or enomos, lawlessness was found in you. If he's the author of lawlessness, how, who put, so the question that we're wrestling with, my father, who put the lawlessness and iniquity in him?
Yeah.
So we're getting into some really hairy stuff here. But yeah, getting back to just the field, man, I think, again, these beings were doing what they were doing probably before recorded history, and getting to understand the case studies, linking all of them together instead of just separating them by virtue of titles and, well, this is the face I put on this phenomenon. I think it would do us well to add everybody to the table, because, and I've said this before, if we're not all at the table, we're going to all be on the menu.
Right. All right. Okay. Now we've gone through who named Lucifer Ben, Satan, demonologist. You mentioned a little bit earlier, and I really want to get into this a little bit more, is the idea of the succubus. Okay, where does that mythos come from?
Where does that what come from? I'm sorry.
Where does that mythos come from?
Mythos. Yeah. So originally, we found beings in ritual bowls carved in there, religious amulets, uh, incantations against certain beings. And one of them, again, we're dealing with consistency here. I think that's what's fascinating, regardless of what title we slapped on them. But yeah, all of a sudden, at that point in time, if you were a man, beings would manifest to you in the image of a lovely handmaiden or a wife or a deceased wife or something, and then it would induce the individual into a dream state and then collect excretions from their bodies. Now, not to get even darker, as if this isn't sinister enough, the very first recordings of us experiencing this as a species included recently deceased men.
Okay.
So Sinistrari of Amino and Montague Summers and other vampirologists included all of this research into their vampirology. And so they had witness accounts, rather, of families just putting the body of the deceased man in the corner and then coming around 2 hours later and something has been done to this body, or somebody would put the casket down and suddenly they would see apparitions near it, or something. Montague Summers even had a couple of cases where people witnessed beings reanimating the cadaver and then taking the excretions. Now we're going to get into some research that's heavy, that it's very, it's going to be deeper than the surface level research that I've heard about this. Forgive me, I'm a bit purist. So yeah, what we're dealing with again is their first manifestations was with the milking of the carcasses of the dead. Now, at first blush in demonology, we argued forever about, okay, whether or not the incubi and the succubi entities were one and the same. Well, I'll just change my shape and get seed, and as then I'll go to a woman as a man, and then I'll inseminate her as an incubus. So all of these are their dynamics, and what we try to do again is, in order to apply agency to them, we separated them by virtue of titles. That's an incubus. This is a succubus. That's a UFO abduction. That's a ghost. All of these terms. Yeah. Now, but if you get to the data suggests that we're dealing with a singular intelligence that is wearing separate masks, making us think that what we are dealing with are actual entities, horns and hooves, right? All of this, without us fully understanding that there's something far darker going on beyond the veil.
Right. When you were talking about like the incubus, do they have the power to inseminate a female? And
here's what we here's what we have. Okay, this gets back to the idea that do angels have seed?
Yeah.
Right. And then this, because I was talking to my dad about this not too long ago, even with the idea of Yeshua HaMashiach, or Jesus Christ in the first century, in order to fulfill the prophecies in the Old Testament, he had to be born of Joseph's seed.
Yeah.
But they never were intimate together prior to this pregnancy. Right. So their idea, one of the working hypothesis, this is weird, and I admit it, it's not my, is that he took seed from Joseph, inseminated Mary with it. Now, if we're dealing with that, then now what we're dealing with are gods who are wanting to become incarnate. And then that may possibly even be the war in which we're part of.
Right. Man, that is so fascinating. I mean, really, the only really thing openly they say is, the house, he's from the house of David.
Right.
But you're absolutely right. And because you talk about, overshadowing Mary, and she's, virgin insemination and birth. just, what is what is that, right? I mean, because
Right.
it's just a bland description and talking about like different entities and stuff. Because I mean, humans love labels and names. We have to put them in a box and check them off and go to the next one. When you're right, I mean, many different faces of the same entity,
Correct.
right?
Correct. Each and
Uh,
every one of each and every one of them. Again, we're looking to see, okay, which mask is real? Like which part of what we're witnessing as a cognitive interface? What part of that is something that's actually real in and of itself? I'll say that because I've had cases of my own where people have witnessed like former lovers. Like one case in India, a young lady reached out to me, and she had witnessed this one being. She said it was one being that manifested to her in 8 different ways, and all of them were men she had been with intimately, even to the point that at first it manifested to her as men that did not wear protection with her, which would mean it was trying to increase the probability of insemination. A whole different level of thinking here.
yeah. Uh, with the because I find the just the act of the incubus and the succubus fascinating too, and that kind of I'm going to go off in the left field a little bit, but it always triggers in me a little bit about. Uh, well, what do you know about Lilith?
So it's very interesting too, because that is within Jewish mysticism.
Right.
I know what I know about her, but again, I can't. Here's why I'm saying what I'm saying. Okay, in the 16th century in witch era literature, there were witches, and this will explain a lot about the phenomenon just by virtue of hearing the case study of like, wait a minute, something's wrong here. But women were going on demonic flights. We would call them UFO abductions. They were going on, it's what they called them back then, demonic flights, where something took them from their biological and geographical location. Sometimes it was out of body. Sometimes they were in body. And these people were taken on demonic flights by what they called an intelligent energy, and then they're taken to an undisclosed location where they copulated with what they thought were corpses and demons. The demons obviously look like demons because, it's a demon. And the corpses, obviously, everybody knows what that is or what they are. But, anyways, in the middle of this theatrical production, these women are thinking that they're making love with demons, they're demon love, whatever. But suddenly the frequency went out in the technology that was being employed in order for all of this theatrical production to occur. It fuzzed in and out for a fleeting moment. These women are looking around at what they thought was an incubi or an incubus and a succubus, a demon. No, what was occurring to them was they were being poked and prodded by metallic objects.
Okay.
It was a program. This is in witch era literature. And so what we witness, though, is that the phenomenon masked itself according to what would gain access to these women.
Yeah.
Again, if you believe I'm a demon and you want, okay, I'll be a demon to you. As long as, and this is scary too. One of the experiencers wrote in diary that one of the objects that was poking her, you can edit this out, but this is alarming. It was circumcised according to a measure of a man. So the phenomenon had, I'm talking, constructed and tailored this production. And then these women, if they never known, if there was no frequency fuzz now, they would have went back to bed. Never, just okay, I'm doing my thing with the demon. Meanwhile, the phenomenon is it's manipulating them.
Right. When like okay, I'm just gonna label demon, right?
Yeah.
When the succubus or when they do inseminate, what is the product of that? Is that purely human, or is this something
There's
that we're delving into?
we're delving into it. So if we're going to get into Genesis 6, again, we're dealing with the pathology of possession. The purpose of possession is not the relocation of consciousness only, but it's the replication of life. It's how these beings stay alive.
Right.
Now, if you're okay, now there's a common misconception in the field, and I hear this mainly from people that they either don't know or they just repeat it from their researchers or something. I don't know. But demons don't have bodies. That's not necessarily true. Many of them did, and they become disembodied, disincarnate. They become what we would consider to be unclean spirits, spirits that wander. They have no rest, and so they possess. Now we're going to get into the missing fetus syndrome. We're going to hit some balls out of the park here, hopefully, and get people thinking. Because what started happening was these beings who needed a new body to possess, they would go out and they would take seed, not of their own, of somebody else, inseminate a woman with that seed, and then possess the fetus that's born inside. Now, is this interesting? I'm getting passionate.
This is so much in my wheelhouse right now. I'm gonna have to wear a neck brace after this is over from the bobblehead.
Okay. Well, dude, so check this out. So what we had again, it's called the curse of Cain, where Yahweh curses them, and you're cursed to wonder. The earth will not accept you. So you have what's called a liminal being, a being that's in between two worlds. It has what I call the disability of being without being a being. There's no central location to it. There's no inhabitants. There's no host. There's no throne. There's no social skin. And so what these beings sought out to do was to create bodies that look like their apparitions. So the way they did that, this is found in the Apocrypha of John, and this will put some pieces together regarding Genesis 6 narrative. They went into women, they inseminated them with the seed, and then it says at first that they manifested to them in the image of their lovers or their husbands. Now, and then at the moment of consummation with someone else's seed, and then they stared into, this is what the Apocrypha of John says. This is an abduction narrative. Thousands of years ago, they stared into the eyes of the female victim. And then it says, then they changed their apparition to what they truly look like. But now they're staring into their eyes. Now, this is all deeply rooted in an Eastern Mediterranean pregnancy ritual, as a fertility ritual. They believed that whatever man the woman was focused upon at the moment of inception, she will birth the material image of that entity through her womb as a child. Now we're getting to something that's very unique in the pathology. If these beings wanted to produce a child that looked like the husband, they would have never changed out of that costume and into who they really are.
Right.
So what they're doing is creating literally social skins to implant their own consciousness in. Now, this is why we have scholars out there, especially evangelical, they can't understand why Rephaim is both giant and its deceased ancestor. Makes no sense, but only through the lens of knowing that the giant was the hardware. The disincarnate consciousness was the software, and putting them both together, then it starts to make sense. Okay, this is what possession has been all
along. Totally. Because, you have I use the term a lot of mythos because it goes back down through time and much in an oral tradition. The Gog and Magog, how that fits into the whole scheme of things too, and then the Nephilim, the mighty men of renown of old, are they then the product of the fall, for lack of a better term, fallen, inseminating human women, and that's what you have, somewhat of a semi-divine entity.
Something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
God doesn't like. Hey guys, this is not. It's flood time now.
Yeah, kill them all. But that also answers another question we see in evangelicalism: is how did these beings survive the flood? Because they're not operating within the contextual hypothesis here. These beings wanted another body to possess, to inhabit. Now, these are what I consider to be the little turds, because their bloody footprints are everywhere, regardless of what kind of face we want to put on them. They're doing what they've always been doing. Okay, if we go into the 16th century, I'll be talking more about this tonight on Coast to Coast. We're dealing with the same pathologies. And it's almost like the phenomenon will wear aliases. It does what it does ritually, but as long as it's Todd, not Jimmy, no big deal, right? No, it's calling itself Todd. Right. It is Jimmy, right? They're doing so. Anyways, yeah. So, one of the aspects of this that's also disturbing is the incubi entity and how it stretched its draconian shadow into the 16th century. We have case studies of the 16th century of women. Actually, a movement of people who were basically CE5ing their way into understanding whatever we're dealing with. And so they would meet in undisclosed locations. They would light candles. They would perform rituals. And the purpose of this was to conjure these beings. Now, this is going to sound like CE5 because I believe CE5 is a modern interpretation of this particular phenomenon. But it's not because I'm wanting it to be, right? I'm not out here trying to, intentionally manipulating data to suggest it's like CE5. No, their grounding foundational principle was called the Gilgal principle or Gilgal doctrine. And the Gilgal doctrine consisted of my intentions determine your intentions with me. And so they would approach these beings that way, which is, we don't even do that with strangers, right?
Yeah. Hey, I want to dovetail again. We touched on it, but I want to delve more into it, and that is Lilith, the whole tale. Can you give the listeners here just a brief what we know of Lilith?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that around because I was on a tangent before and I would have forgotten what I'm going to say now.
Like Led Zeppelin, man, ramble on.
Yeah, right. So again, Lilith is not alone in the fact that if you notice comparative literature in that time period in that part of the world, you'll see that before we have Lilith, we have Lil, L-I-M. And Lil is what Phoenicians and Akkadians alike, they all called Lil. They all termed it Lil, but really what it was the disincarnate potential of consciousness in each and every person. And so we have writings, many ancient writings, where when people are dying, they'll reference their ghost as Lil. When my Lil leaves my body, put me, all this stuff. And so what you have here, originally the legend was Pakad Lila, Lilith, Leilu. Is not just the origin of Lilith, but Lilith itself was designed, the Lil part was designed to characterize and to specify the nature of her spirit. She was consciousness. So that part of her, it's Lilith. So anyway, so Lilith was said to have been a woman who did, again, missing fetus syndrome, as a woman who was barren or something, could not have kids in life. And so what she did is she took babies from the womb. And so Lilith, and not just that, right, but becoming that which would give birth to these beings. So it's very unique. But there, again, with incubi and succubi, the same thing with Lilith and Leilu. There is a masculine and a feminine version, right? But yeah, so I think what we're dealing with, again, a lot of this goes back to consciousness, not new life discovered, but old life, consciousness discovered in a new way.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. To me, that makes perfect sense. Because I mean, when we talk, Adam and Eve and the garden and early on, we're dealing a lot with metaphor.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so within that, if you're taking it on a metaphorical level, that makes perfect sense that there would be that sort of consciousness, right? As Adam's consciousness or Eve's consciousness. And the only interpretation I have of Lilith is the Kabbalic traditions.
Correct.
Explain to the people what Lilith is according to their Kabbalic phraseology.
Yeah. So, as far as I'm aware of, the classic tradition was that she had seduced Adam and created this hybrid race of demons. That's what I was told.
Yeah.
The hybridization program, she was the mother of demons. That's what they call it, the mother of demons. And that there was this hybrid race, that she was Adam's first wife. And again, it's like we have to pick through it all to figure out, okay, which one's allegory, which one's true? Were these really hybrid beings? Or was she consciousness that was simply trying to replicate life so that she herself could stay alive? See, again, this idea is pervasive in the literature, that there were beings that were dislocated, suffered the disability of being. And in order for them to stay in this dimension, they had to keep creating bodies.
Right.
Now, we see this in high magic, dark sorcery. One of them is called the Red Rite, one of the rituals, and that is when a magician would suffer a debilitating disease or a death spiral or something, he would go out and he would take seed and inseminate a woman with a baby. This is not new stuff. Yeah. And then would place his consciousness in that baby, and what you have is a hybrid. And this is why I say, when people, the whole field of ufology is so focused, well, much of it is not a lot, but what are these hybrids? And they go back to the DNA, and I'm thinking, okay, that's great, but whose consciousness is going to be in the hybrid?
Right. When we talk, I love dovetailing, because as we're progressing in the convo, different stuff comes up, and with my ADD, hey, look, it's a squirrel. I sometimes have to dovetail back because some things just occur to me. When you were talking about looking into the eyes and then showing their true form, is there ever a description of that true form?
I haven't read any. It's a strange question. I mean, no, it's a great question. It's strange that you mentioned that, because usually when we get down into what the images are, it's mostly always just this fictitious presentation. I did a show, Strange Recon, a long time ago, and it's weird. And once you start talking about this research, people come out of the woodwork, because now you're telling stories that are just like theirs. And it's a really interesting process, and I think helpful for others. But anyways, this individual heard that I was coming on, and she told a story. She said, one night I'm in bed. She said, my husband comes around the corner of the bed, and, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. 30 minutes later, he's, standing at the edge of the bed looking at her, and she's looking at him, and she's like, at first I thought, okay, I'm a little bit drowsy, and, maybe I'm just tired. I'll go take a nap of some sort. And she said, then she looked at him again, and he turned his head. And when he turned his head, she freaked out, because she said, that's not the man I'm married to. And when, literally, she didn't say it, but it was almost like she thought it. And as soon as she did, he just started laughing, and then disappeared into a smoke, and then flew out the hall into the hallway. That's not out of the ordinary. So, but what my colleagues and I now are looking at is, okay, if we're dealing with entities or a phenomenon that has all power to get whatever they want and can from us, then what is the purpose of playing a role?
Gotcha. Hey, before you get out of here, last question I want to delve into is Ouija boards as being like gateways and what comes through the other side. I had a Ouija board experience when I wore a much younger man's clothes, and I won't delve into it too much, but something followed me, and it was actually my brothers were in the room too because I came home and I was freaked, right? And so I run upstairs. The teenager Jason with hair runs upstairs, and brothers come in. They're like, "What the heck's going on? You know, what's wrong with you?" And I'm just like, you know, because when you run into something that is not of the natural world, like the tangible, everyday touch, feel, smell, five senses, your brain almost stops because it doesn't know how to process something that has never been conceived in that mind, right? And that's the way I was like, holy cow, what did I just do? Yeah, you know. And then whatever it was, man, just upstairs, second floor window in my bedroom, and it proceeds to bang on the walls, outside walls, and the window. And of course, my brother, like, holy cow, you know, and someone climb up a ladder and try to bring whatever, you know, try to find a meaning to it. But to me, man, Ouija boards are some serious stuff. That beware of what you're what you're looking for, because what comes back out may not necessarily what you intended it to be.
No kidding.
Yeah, so talk to me about like Ouija boards as in like a gateway or something for these demon entities.
Yeah, well, I think the Ouija board is an extension of the mortal portal that is us. We're the ones holding the letters and all this stuff. We're doing all this. So I think that the idea of, or holding the object with letters, I think the idea of the Ouija board being a portal is indeed true. But I think again that these beings are looking for the mortal portal, and they're using the Ouija board to bait us into contact. This is a disturbing aspect of it, and this gets back to the 16th century. And I'll shut up after this real quick. But in the midst of their little CE5 thing, women were waking up in the middle of the night, thinking that they just had a nightmare of a being assaulting them. I can't say this benign on the show. I just can't, stuff. But I will tell you guys, because we're a little bit freer than God. But these women felt, okay, it was a bad nightmare. You know what I mean? No worries. I was really asleep. I could feel it. I was REM, whatever. It's just a bad dream. They go to work, they're put on their makeup or something, and they look at bruises on their hands that correlate directly with what they experienced in the nightmare, even to the point of having ligature marks.
Right.
So the deception here is pervasive. It's perverted, and we as a species, we're groping in the darkness. Really to understand. Okay, this is what this is what they're manifesting. This is what they're allowing us to remember. What are they wanting us to forget? And that's at the heart of the research.
Right. Because there is so much that as we move through the sands of time that we've lost so much. Whereas man, that when primitive man, not even close to that, but had a much more of a grip on what these were more than us. We just go on 9-to-5 lives, watching movies, hopefully reading books, but again, we've kind of lost touch of what man really was or is. And so when we talk about things like the Ouija board and stuff, we run up against things that we either have lost through the ages, or because we had no concept of it. I'd be honest with you, usually in radio, the cardinal sin is no dead air, right? So you just ran, on, and I couldn't speak. I didn't know what to think. What the heck is this? Obviously, when you're a guy and you're a teenager, and then suddenly you run up against something that is infinitely more powerful than you, something that you can only sense, and what you're sensing ain't great,
100%.
We tend to just, deer in the headlights. And I was a deer in the headlights. And man, when that banging started, I'll be honest with you, I want I want in the fetal position, you know.
No doubt.
But luckily, after that, I've never had any more problems. I've had some what I would consider maybe ghost activity,
Mhm.
but nothing I would classify as the classical supernatural demons and or
Right.
yeah.
There's certainly a difference, man. Like, okay, so Sinistrari, first of all, this is a lot of sick stuff. I know it is. Um, but I'm not alone in finding out that these beings were leaving semen samples on their victims. I talked to James Bartley yesterday or the day before. James is, James. He's was a contemporary to Dr. Carla Turner, mentored by Barbara Bartholic. And I just asked him point blank, because I have Dr. Turner's books in my library too. And I said, man, I'm just going to ask James, did you in your research with Dr. Turner and Barbara Bartholic, did you ever come in contact with women who had semen samples from these beings? And they said, absolutely. Absolutely. So this is right. This is not okay, lovers and light. I mean, this is really dark stuff. But Sinistrari of Amino not only collected semen samples, but he believed that a lot of these semen samples had been taken from recently deceased men. And so that it was not just the seed they were using, but it was what they were using it for in the rituals they were performing during the insemination. This gets back to a whole other show that we got to do because, again, and I'll stop, but the shortest horror story ever written was the last man on earth was alone in his house and there came a knock on the door. What is that? That's out there. Right? And why is it employing rituals like it's a serial killer phenomenon?
Right. And rituals that may or may not be something that you can completely understand because they're maybe from a different paradigm of, we get it from Eastern philosophy, Western philosophy, all the different places. And maybe we just don't understand or have a grasp on what's going on.
Right.
Yeah.
At all. If you look at the tradition of oratory incantation, the purpose of incantation is incarnation. Yeah. So what are we looking at here exactly? That's why I don't agree with the ET hypothesis. I think that's just because we don't have a working vocabulary at this point. We're doing whatever we can at this point, but they're transcending every blueprint. So it's either that the phenomenon has evolved because it's evolving alongside of us, or it's evolving in order to evade us, which I believe is what they're doing. That this new idea is, again, it's a new evolution, but it's also a new way to evade our senses.
Yeah.
Which
man, listen, it's about time to end the sucker, and I've still got like a good page, almost 2 more pages to questions, man, because I dig this, man.
Yeah, man, sure.
But I as much as I want to, I can't. We've gotta let you right off into the sunset. So last question for you: what's next for Nathaniel Gillis?
Oh man, I don't know. I've got to get out of my own way. I know that. I have goals. If you can't tell already, I'm not like a lot of the other demonologists. I'm just different, and I'm not saying that's in a good way or a bad way. It's just it's present. I know. So what I'm looking to do now is kind of grow beyond that specific field of research and become just a general researcher, and hopefully lecture. I have a lot of friends in the UK. There are talks of me possibly coming and lecturing there. But my goal next part of my career, I'd like to do lectures in person and in a more academic manner, right? With people who are willing to think out of the box and out of the coffin in order for us to gain more access to this stuff.
Excellent. Yeah, there is something here in Oregon called the Oregon Ghost Conference. It's once a year, and a lot of different people from different disciplines come, and a lot of academia. I was really surprised about guys in their ivy towers coming down and giving, dusting off the books and actually talking about it. I was impressed, man. We got to get you over here for that, man.
Dude, I'd freak out, man.
I think you would. I think you would be at home, and I think it's an audience that would have that open mind.
Yeah, I'd love it, man. I mean, right now, what people are doing, which it took me a while to get to this place, but right now people are just okay. And I'm not hinting at this. I'm just saying it's pretty fun. Okay, hop on the show and give a 45-minute presentation. Just talk, basically, just talk. And so that's what I've been doing. Leak Project, all these other shows. It's just talks. I'm like, all right. So I'm used to doing that. Is my point. So it'd be really cool.
Yeah. Man, we got to get you on the show again because I've only talked just a little bit, and I started asking questions that weren't on my cheat sheet, and so now I've got like 2 more stuff. And let's be fascinating, man. Nathaniel, thank you so much for coming on, man. This is right in my wheelhouse. This is like Christmas morning, man.
Yeah, man. We can book another show as soon as you want. I'm just glad I've got to get through this busy stint. And then I can't wait after all these are done. I'm gonna go to my favorite chicken wing joint, watch some baseball, throw a few back, and honestly, dude, it's hard not to get burnt out. That's the biggest thing.
Right. Okay, quickly, this has nothing to do with nothing. Yeah. This is lightning round, so I'm throwing it out there.
Yeah.
Who's your favorite baseball team?
Right now, it's the Reds. We used to suck for like 25, 30 years. Now we're good, I guess. I like this Eli De La Cruz guy, or Ellie De La Cruz. He's a stud. But I don't really watch much baseball. I'm a football guy. I love football.
Yeah. Bro. Okay, favorite football team?
College or pro?
Oh, both. All of the above.
Well, Buckeye fan. Yes, but Buckeye fan because I'm born and raised in Ohio. And if I had to choose, this is going to hurt. I used to be a Pats fan.
Okay.
Even though I'm a Buckeye fan, I was a Brady fan.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a paradox. But I would have to go
Michigan.
Do
right?
what?
Brady, Michigan?
Yeah, he did. I would say right now, I'm going to pick another Ohio team. Cincinnati's good.
Yeah.
I love Cincinnati, dude. And they plus my favorite steakhouse has a steak named after Joey Burrow, so it's kind of like it fits.
There you go. Yeah, my listeners right now, when this comes out, they're gonna be like, "Oh my gosh, what is he doing?" But my favorite baseball teams, I have a National League and an American League team. American League, the New York Yankees, simply because when I was a real little kid, Reggie Jackson, Mr. October, and then on the on the National League side, it was the long-suffering Chicago Cubs.
Ooh.
Every year, kind of like, oh, next year, it's gonna be next year. And finally, but favorite team to me is again NFC is going to be Minnesota Vikings because my grandpa liked it, and AFC was the first team I ever liked when I was a wee little sprout, and that's the New York Jets.
Okay.
So anyways, I'm gonna yammering on about football. Hey, welcome to Midnight Alchemy. Today we're gonna talk about football. Anyway, college, dude. Oregon Ducks. They may be playing Ohio State every year now. It looks like
it'll be interesting.
They go to the Big Ten. So anyway,
I know they beat us a couple. Well, they beat us the other year, 2 years ago. I think it was. But yeah, man, we'll do another show. Like I said, just hit me up, and I'm booking for August is filling up, so I'm probably booking for like September or whatever, man. You know me, just send me an email or something, and we'll work it out, brother.
All right, so let's do a little in-house goings on. We've got a new voicemail line so that you can call and give us your paranormal story. And I just might put it on the air. Or if you think that you might be a good guest or guest ideas, drop us a line. The number is 971-205-2464. Again, 971-205-2464. You can always email us too by sending it to midnightalchemyshow@gmail.com. midnightalchemyshow@gmail.com. All right. Hey, folks, thank you for giving us a listen and continuing to support the show. Until next episode, me, Jason Allen, says, Arrivederci.